Hello and welcome to Press Pass, a new show on GNet TV's News Project. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director here at GNet TV. It's my pleasure to be with you today, and also my pleasure to be with two good friends of mine who I'm going to introduce to you shortly. The show is about basically journalism and about coverage of local and regional events. We're going to focus on that during our approximately once a month editions here. So therefore, it's great to have with me today Jim Therien, who is a reporter with the Bennington Banner, Berkshire Eagle, and also VT Digger. And also Greg Sukenik, who is the editor of the Manchester Journal. Great to have you gentlemen with us today, and thanks very much for making the time to be here.
It's great to be here, Andrew.
So we're starting the show at an auspicious time, I think. By coincidence, it's about 1 year, almost to the day, when new ownership acquired the Banner, the Journal, the Eagle, and the Brattleboro Reformer. And it seems like a good time to kind of talk a little bit about how those changes have affected all the papers involved, and kind of just how local ownership, it seems, has returned to this area, in contrast to the national picture, where we're continuing to see that consolidation of newsrooms and papers and shrinking budgets and all of that sort of stuff. Greg, let me start with you. How has the new ownership affected you? You've been here since October.
I've been here since October.
Well, the Southern Vermont Drug Task Force has been very busy this last week or so. Starting on Friday, there was about a dozen people, or it was announced that about a dozen people had been arrested as part of a 4-month-long investigation from that task force, and that was just in Bennington and Rutland counties alone. So you've got a dozen drug arrests on Friday announced, and then the day after in Bennington, a man named Dean Carbone from Springfield, Mass. was pulled over by Bennington police and arrested for possession of 240 bags of heroin. I think the street value was around $3,000. So already a big and busy week. And then yesterday morning, there was a joint arrest of 2 men at the Four Winds Motel in Manchester, in a collaborative effort between the FBI and the Drug Task Force. And these 2 men were arrested on heroin charges, but it seems like the investigation into those 2 men started back in October when there was the double homicide in Townsend. And what happened then is a man named Justin Watt has been arraigned for that. He's of Springfield, Mass. As well. And it seems like what happened is that the 2 people in that cabin or shed were shot, and then the shed was set on fire. And so they found out afterwards that it was a homicide, and in the course of investigating him, they found connections to these 2 men, Jonathan Resto and Anthony Cassiano. So they're set to be arraigned this afternoon up in Burlington, which will be interesting as well.
Well, I know the Drug Task Force has been busy in the past with a couple of sweeps, although it's been a while since they had a sweep that netted that many people in our immediate area here.
And then just last night, the MPD also arrested 2, Brandy Marrow and Travis Norton, or Brandy Marrow Grover, excuse me, were both arrested on heroin charges as well. And that was announced last night. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes.
Well, on your side of the mountain, it seems that the communities have a little more confidence in perhaps being able to keep their school boards with how strongly the voting results went?
Well, yes and no, because I don't know if the debate amongst the schools are so much educational, in the fact that it seemed like a lot of people didn't want to do it because they didn't want to do it, because they wanted to keep their local boards. There was a lot of arguments that people like going to town meeting, and people like talking about their school budgets at town meeting, and you kind of lose that when there's one big district and one budget. So there were not a lot of arguments educationally that we can't do this because there's a mountain. I mean, there's a lot of schools, Dummerston and Putney are very close together. It would be very easy to see one board overseeing all of that. But we're going to have to see what they come up with. Yeah, it's hard to say.
It's interesting to hear how the conversation was framed in Windham County, because here the study committee very much tried to give off the message that voting no on this vote is not a vote against Act 46. Act 46 is the law of the land. This is just whether we're trying to make the best of a bad situation, was how they framed it. So it's interesting to see how the different communities had that discussion.
Right, and what they were really talking about in Windham County, and in a lot of I went to Act 46 meetings all around the state, is that we have to do this anyway. And if we don't do this now, the state board is going to force it. And at least if we write our own plan, you know, we can make decisions, we could decide on the size of the board, we could decide on how we're going to share Spanish and music, et cetera. And once the state tells us what they want, that's kind of taken out of our hands.
It's going to be interesting to see exactly how forcefully the state does attempt to implement some of that, because I'm sure they're going to run into a lot of resistance locally when push really does come to shove. You know, well, how rigorous are we going to? Is it just going to be like sort of this diktat coming down from Montpelier saying, well, we've looked at your situation, this is what we think is the way to go to meet the requirements of the law, and you guys had your chance to come up with something that was more tailored to your local conditions, but